go to the state of Texas. The team that probably made the most waves in the portal this year was Texas Tech, and we go down to Lubbock tonight. Joe, when you look into the 2025 season on what some people believe could be the Big 12 champion and also a playoff contender because they're the Big 12 champion, what are your thoughts when you look at Texas Tech going into the 2025 season?
Look, we've done this before. We have hyped up Texas Tech, and they haven't exactly lived up to the expectations that we had hoped for. And there's been a recurring theme for why we've hyped up Texas Tech. It's because they do such a great job in the transfer portal. They have done some really underrated and promising things for a Big 12 team in high school recruiting as well. With all that being said, I think that this year's different. I think that this year's crop of guys that they brought in the transfer portal are the best that they've had. They brought in 8 kids that were in the top 100 of On3's portal rankings. And that includes David Bailey, who they just brought in from Stanford, which I'm sure we'll get to. They brought in 2 great tackles in Hunter Zambrano from Illinois State and Howard Sampson, who's 6'8", 330 from UNC. Cole Wisniewski from North Dakota State is a hammer of a strong safety who will come down and smack you. But I think the biggest part about this, with all these talented players that are coming in, Blake, I really like Behren Morton. I really do, man. I think that he might take the cake outside of Leavitt, might be one of the best, if not the best, returning quarterback in the Big 12 outside of Leavitt. I think that Morton has shown some brilliant things and has been under-recognized on a week-by-week basis last year. Mm-hmm. Having a guy like that returning with his experience, with the pieces around him, makes me feel optimistic that this time around we're not getting in over our head and they can actually get the job done.
Here's the thing with Morton in this offense. When I look at Texas Tech, you went out and got a pair of tackles in Zambrano and Sampson and Jados. Okay, not only that, you went out and got Virgil, who was around 800 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns a year ago. You bring back Douglas. You bring back multiple receivers. And look, we still have not gotten to Mekhi Hudson returning. What could that be? But you bring back 2 receivers that had over 7 touchdowns that you had on your team a year ago. Joe, I don't think you touched on it offensively. What might have been the biggest steal in the entire portal. That's Terrence Carter, the tight end. Holy shit. Dude, they got weapons. Now, Taj Brooks is out the door, okay? But you look at Texas Tech and you say, Joe, I got multiple receivers that had a lot of production returning. I add one that had a lot of production. By the way, Texas Tech fans, close your ears for just a second. In a conference that showed most of the time they couldn't cover. Let's call it what it is. How many times did we go and we talk about Big 12 games during the season? We're like, Joe, they're throwing the ball all over the place. It was literally every week. It was literally every single week. In reference to that, when I look at Texas Tech, offensively, you bring back all the pieces that, Joe, to some extent, even if you miss, I could still make the justification that you got a lot of really good pieces returning, bud, right? Like you got multiple offensive linemen, but you do have 2 tackles that can play for you. You bring in a receiver in Virgil. You bring back Douglas. You bring back some other parts of that. So offensively, when you look at the quarterback situation and you look at them as a whole, 63% completion percentage, 3,375 yards, 27 touchdowns. The interceptions need to come down a little. 8, I think is still a lot. Joe, offensively, they can do some really good things. I don't feel like that they felt, maybe outside the line of scrimmage, that they had necessarily an issue offensively, where I felt like that they just knew that they had to get better to win the Big 12. Joe, they went out and got 10 different players in the portal defensively. You talked about David Bailey at Stanford, who had 31 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and 7 sacks. You talk about Bryce Pollock. By the way, we didn't even talk about the safety, the North Dakota State kid, by the way, who's 6'4", 220, and had 8 interceptions last year in the FCS, one of the tops in the FCS in interceptions. Joe, they added not only a lot of pieces, brother, they add a lot of experience a part of that. This group can win the Big 12. I fully believe that Texas Tech is a team that I know that other teams that will look their noses down at the Big 12. By the way, they call me Big 12 Blake. I don't know if you know that.
But
yeah,
totally.
They will look their noses down. They will look their noses down at Texas Tech and what has been going on. They will look down at this. This is a bona fide playoff team, whether you want to admit it or not, because they can win their conference. They got a slate that we'll talk about in a minute. Can they overcome some of these things? Joe, they killed the portal for them in the conference that they'll be in.
I think that the biggest thing that catches my attention outside of what we kind of talk about here with Morton, who really good decision maker, ball comes out of his hand quick, always delivers it where it needs to be for his receivers to come down with it, works really well in this offense. One more year as a starter, he gets the chance to shine.
He's had production in every single year in college, by the way.
Yes, which is huge to have coming back. But I think what catches my attention is looking at the portal haul that they had and bringing in guys that we know that teams in the SEC and Big Ten along the lines of scrimmage really badly wanted.
Yes.
David Bailey, Romello Height from Georgia Tech.
David Bailey got offers from Oregon, LSU, Georgia, Texas, Florida.
This is not your typical Big 12 roster.
No,
the Big 12 did not have a team with bodies like this on both lines of scrimmage. That is where I think that even if all these guys don't even live up to the expectation that we're placing on them, they at least have the talent and they have the size. How many Big 12 teams do you know that have a starting tackle that is 6'8", 330? There aren't many teams that have that.
They can't move.
Or they transfer out immediately. Those kids don't stick around and they stay. Texas Tech has had the money, and it has been a slow buildup to getting more and more big-name players to come play for this team. I really think that this is that year where they go on to win the conference, and they go on to continue to make a name for themselves.
So you're saying
as a premier Big 12 team. Yeah, I know that this is the first Big 12 team that we have previewed, and there are more Big 12 teams for us to talk about, and I need to do more research on some of them. But on paper, this looks like the most gifted because Arizona State lost their best player, lost a couple of bodies. Colorado lost a ton of bodies, and we got to talk about them at some point. Utah's got a really good offensive line, but they've got question marks at quarterback and a couple of other spots. This Texas Tech team has a roster that we do not typically see in this conference.
No, I completely agree. Joe, they are a bona fide playoff contender, whether we want to admit it or not. The question I will throw back your way, and what worries me, brother, you ain't got 10 dudes from the portal. You better hope 5 of them hit, okay? That's a lot. That is a lot. The secondary alone, okay? Winowinski, is that, or Wisniewski, okay, and Bryce Pollock are instant starters, okay? Because they're getting paid. So Texas Tech fans, you can come in the chat and say, no, they're not. No, they're not. Yeah, they are. They're getting paid. Okay. You need communication there. It's going to be very interesting to see how Texas Tech responds early when you got that much non-cohesion on your defense.
I think that that's a good point that we always bring up when we talk about these defenses, is that when you're bringing in this many new faces, there is a swinging pendulum of outcomes. There is either the Florida State of a couple of years ago. This is the easy example we always turn to. The Florida State team that went 12-0, or the Florida State team that went 2-10.
Mm-hmm.
There are some unproven commodities on here. There are a number of guys, like I can tell you, Zambrano and Wisniewski. The NFL had eyes on them for the upcoming draft. They were highly regarded for the upcoming draft. David Bailey is somebody who I've heard NFL teams like because he's a great athlete, needs to develop a little bit more. There is a level of unproven talent here, and you're asking them all to come in in a singular offseason to learn to play amongst one another.
Yeah.
That is where the one pause comes into place, where if the wheels start to come off, it's going to be because we've got so many different dudes that came from so many different schools. It's an easy thing to talk about.
Before we get to the schedule, all I will say is this. Just because we say they can win the Big 12 does not make them 9-3 and 10-2 in that conference. A 10-2 team won that conference a year ago. So let's call it what it is. Joe, let's look at their schedule. It's actually for them somewhat of a little difficult one, depending on where the best teams they play and where they play them. But they start off with Arkansas Pine Bluff in week 1. They have Kansas State in week 2. They have Oregon.
Kent State.
What'd I say?
Kansas.
Oh, sorry. They play Kansas State later in the schedule, if I'm not mistaken. I think in November. Kent State, in week 2. Week 3, they have Oregon State at home. Then they have Utah on the road, Houston on the road to start October, but there is a bye week in between there. They have Kansas, along with going on the road to Arizona State. They have Oklahoma State at Kansas State as well, and then BYU and UCF and West Virginia to finish out the Big 12 slate. What do you think about this schedule?
Well, one thing that catches my attention that's really beneficial for them is they've got that bye week, the second to last week of the season. So you get an advantage there to catch your breath after a bit of a long stretch as you're gearing up, hopefully, for the Big 12 championship game. I mean, I got to be honest, like the schedule looks a little tough. I wouldn't say it's
here's the thing for me. Well, you got Utah on the road, hostile place to play. You got Houston on the road. You got Arizona State on the road. You have Kansas State on the road. And God forbid Rich Rod in West Virginia find a way. Joe, I can make the argument that all 5 of their games that are the toughest are on the road.
Yeah, that's a very good point, which is never a draw that you want to end up having. And it feels like they've got 1, 2, 3, 4. They've got 5 away games, which I guess is standard in conference play. They're kind of relying on a lot of these like cakewalk games at the beginning of the years that are like real true home opportunities. Kansas should be a winnable and beatable game for them at home as well. I think that's a good point. Like if they do run into a buzzsaw that slows them down, it is going to be a pretty arduous road schedule. I still see a 10-2 team.
I could see them being 9-3, okay, or 10-2, like if they win the conference there. I can also see this not completely falling on its face. It's a lot of players to bring in, brother. Morton's got to really hone in on those turnovers early in the season. But what would scare me, and what does scare me for them, again, I feel like every one of your tough games are on the road. And when you have a team that, quite honestly, let's call them what it is a team full of mercenaries. You went and hired a team full of mercenaries. How is that chemistry in that locker room? And is that going to be able to be enough to overcome a tough schedule for you? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Having a schedule like this with a lot of transfer players could end up killing them.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they have a little bit of an early pocket those first 3 weeks to get themselves in line, figure out what their identity is, get focused, travel to Utah, and if you can win that game, you get a breather before you have to go through a very, very difficult stretch